now we're going to switch over to Diane Bailey, who's the executive director of the Menlo Spark organization, and they've been focusing on decarbonizing the Menlo Park, Silicon Valley community. They're real leaders there. They're one of our clients. We recently just published a guide to commercial buildings, trying to help out Silicon Valley in electrifying their big buildings. So, Diane, let's see.
Hey there.
All right. Take it away, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us. Teach us about electric cars, please.
Hey everyone, I am talking to you from a public library. If anyone has trouble hearing me, let me know and I'll switch to a headset.
That's great so far.
Good. Okay, next slide. So happy to be here talking about electric vehicles and how to electrify all of our mobility. Today I'm going to cover some of our climate and EV goals for California, how to electrify mobility, talk a little bit about equity and our initiative called EVs for Everyone, and then talk a tiny bit about the latest in EVs with pickup trucks and some of the other exciting products coming on the market. And lastly, vehicle to grid. Although Sean, you're the expert, I'm just going to kind of tee that up, and then folks can look at our upcoming commercial all-electric guide for more on vehicles to grid. Next slide. So a little bit about Menlo Spark, who we are. We are a small environmental group, a community nonprofit based in Menlo Park, looking to advance a climate neutral goal for Menlo Spark and generally create a more sustainable region. We work with businesses, local governments, and of course residents all over Silicon Valley. Next slide. And this chart actually shows our pathway to reach zero carbon, of which electric vehicles are a big part. Okay, so why are we focused on electric vehicles, among other things? If you look at the total greenhouse gas emissions for California, it's about 500 million metric tons of carbon dioxide, and 40% of that is transportation. And we fully have the technology to electrify most of that pie wedge. To the right, there's a little bit of a quote about the need for speed in advancing electric solutions in mobility. And I crossed out 2050. This is from a quote from ICCT. And it seems like there's global consensus that we need to do everything we can to electrify mobility, but the goal used to be 2050. And I think last fall with the IPCC report that came out, we really need to accelerate our goal to more like 2030. Next slide. All right, so we have some goals here in California around becoming climate neutral as a state by 2045, reducing our air pollution, expanding EV usage, and in the Bay Area, there's a goal to dramatically scale up with 90% of vehicles being electric by 2050. And we also want to get off of fossil fuels. Next slide. Okay, fortunately, we've actually had a lot of growth in new EV purchasing rates. Palo Alto leads the nation with almost 30% of new vehicles being electric or plug-in hybrid, but mostly electric. And you can see there are cities throughout California that are hitting close to 20%. And this is from 2017, again, from ICCT. They're a great source for this information. They periodically update these, and we expect next year's report to show much higher percentages of new EV purchasing. Also want to note on the infrastructure side that a lot of cities have made great advances in requiring new EV charging for new construction. And there's actually a master plan that was put out for Silicon Valley. It's through a project called Peninsula Advanced Energy Communities. And there's an image from the report. I can share that with anyone. It just contains model best practices on EV charging infrastructure for communities. Next slide. Okay, so a couple of years ago, several of us local EV advocates and activists got a little impatient with the rate of progress and felt like it was mainly environmentalists purchasing EVs and that local government was not doing enough to really advance EVs in local fleets or do enough of public outreach. And so we got together and we held an EV charrette to try to elicit some new ideas, fresh ideas to really accelerate the uptake of EVs within general fleets and really convert the fleet. We did not come up with any silver bullet ideas, but we did converge around 3 major areas where we needed to really dramatically increase our efforts. And the first was infrastructure, really focusing on multifamily infrastructure. So housing for people, we recognize this as a major barrier, and also looking at schools and workplaces so that anyone who wanted to own an EV would have charging accessible. The second area is really boosting EV awareness and really upping the marketing. We felt that past attempts at marketing sort of fell short and were not that appealing. And also getting more people just to test drive EVs. And we were finding that with the current level of test drive events, that new folks that we attract to those events really enjoyed EVs, and that there was a good conversion rate if you could attract people to actually try it and test drive. And that's especially true for Teslas. So the third area that we really needed to up our efforts on was increasing the incentives. And here we really felt that focus on lower income communities was overdue, and that we really needed to break some cultural barriers to convince people that electric vehicles were not just for wealthy folks. And there was a white paper that came out of that charrette. It's pictured to the side, and I'm happy to email a copy to anyone who would like it. Next slide. Okay, so on infrastructure, I'm happy to say that we have made good gains since the charrette. There are a number of municipal building codes that actually go pretty far and require 1 EV charger per new residential unit. So for new multifamily that's being built, every new tenant would, in theory, have access to charging. And this is great news for new multifamily. Of course, for existing, we're really looking for a lot of investment in retrofits. Locally here in Silicon Valley, our 2 community choice energy agencies are teaming together. That's Peninsula Clean Energy and Silicon Valley Clean Energy. They're working together to support what we call a 32 city strategy. So that's all the member cities in the area to advance new EV infrastructure through Cal Green Code updates. And so what'll happen is these agencies will hire a consultant and create the model code and do the outreach within the cities, and then basically serve each city the model code and sort of do some hand-holding to get those codes adopted. And we think that the codes that were adopted in Palo Alto and Menlo Park that require 1 charger per new residential unit could spread throughout Silicon Valley and then be a model for the rest of the state. Also want to note that Peninsula Clean Energy last December approved $16 million for EV infrastructure and incentive programs. And they'll be working to leverage that with other programs from PG&E, from the Air District, from the Energy Commission, from VW's Electrify America settlement. And they're really looking to focus on multifamily and disadvantaged communities. Next slide. Okay, so increasing awareness is also key to getting more EVs on the street. And I think probably most of you have been to an EV ride and drive or are aware that local organizations are hosting these. But we're really looking for more public signage and a little bit more awareness and public advertising of the, not just the ride and drives, but the fact that this public infrastructure is there for everyone to use. Next slide. Oh, sorry, and I wanted to notice, just going back to the EV awareness, that there is a new pilot to provide EV test drives and EV car sharing in multifamily and disadvantaged communities, and that's going to be starting up later this year, so we're excited about that. One other idea that came out of the charrette is to do a car B&B to make car rentals, develop a standard so that car rentals could be electric and give people more opportunities to try out EVs when they travel. Next slide. Okay, so this slide is a little busy, but this is a handout from our EVs for Everyone program. We ran a workshop last year in Redwood City with Transform, and Actera and a bunch of local partners. And the point was really to highlight the number of affordable electric vehicles that are out there for people and all the incentives available. So there are a lot of incentives. I'm not going to run through each and every one. One thing that's not very well known is the maintenance savings. When you switch to an EV, there are at least 10 moving parts that you're not having in the EV anymore because you don't have an internal combustion engine. And so the graphic shows some of these, and basically the tally is that you can save over $3,000 in avoided maintenance over the life of an EV. Next slide. So our local CCE, Peninsula Clean Energy, made this graphic to really emphasize the cost savings that you can achieve if you switch your gas guzzling car to an electric, and also the carbon savings, even with their standard, I think they call it Eco Plus energy that they provide that's almost carbon free. The carbon savings are huge. And then if you opt up to their 100% renewable energy program, their Eco 100, you can save about 7,000 pounds of CO2 per year. So that's a pretty good savings. And then we just interviewed some local EV advocates. There's a quote on the bottom of the slide from Vanessa Warheit in Palo Alto, who some of you know, just talking about how easy it is to lease EVs and how much you can save each month if you do that. And the lease deals change monthly, but there are websites that monitor that, and they're always really great EV lease deals to be had. Next slide. So last year we also started an EV PV program together with a community partner, Grid Alternatives. We've been working with Grid Alternatives to install solar on low-income households in East Menlo Park and East Palo Alto for the past few years. We've done about 50 homes. And the solar panels are totally free if you qualify on income levels. So last year we decided to use the built up client base from that program and then prospective new clients and offer them free EV charging to go with their solar, just to try to help folks in lower income areas become aware of how much they could save by trading in their gas guzzling vehicles for an EV. And these are some of the flyers that we used. We had them, of course, translated into Spanish and held some workshops and had the cities of Menlo Park and East Palo Alto supporting the program. So far, we've had 5 clients sign up for the free EV chargers. This program was supported by Chan Zuckerberg, and unfortunately, they didn't renew the grant. But next slide, on a happier note, we hope to continue it, and there's actually a lot of support for rebates and low-income programs from our local air district and also from a new cap and trade funded program partnering with Beneficial State Bank. This is a slide from the Bay Area Air District program. We call it Clean Cars for All. They call it the Enhanced Fleet Modernization Program Plus Up, which is kind of a mouthful. So again, Clean Cars for All. So this Bay Area version of the program offers 2 different types of rebates. One is for trading in your old clunker of a car for a new EV, and the other is a somewhat lesser rebate when you trade in your gas car. You can get credits for alternative transportation. So you can get a free Clipper card loaded with a lot of cash and renewed monthly, or you can get a voucher for bike sharing, car sharing, or van pool. Next slide. Okay, so the focus on this chart is really just that if you look at the number in the red circle, you can get up to $10,000 as a rebate if you trade in your gas car for an electric vehicle. So this is really twice the level coming from the state through Beneficial State Bank. That level is about $4,500 or $5,000 from Beneficial State Bank loans, which is also great. But this particular program through the Air District really encourages the retiring, and they actually crush the cars of these old gas guzzler vehicles. And you don't just get the $9,500 for the EV as a point of sale rebate, you also get $2,000 of credit towards a home charger. So that's a nice way to backfill the program that we started with Grid Alternatives that didn't get refunded. And then you can see that you can get up to $4,500 for the alternative transportation, which is also great, really encourages alternatives to solo driving. And on the left-hand side of the chart, you can see that the rebates change with income levels. And so this is really tied to federal poverty rates. But we know that even mid-level income folks might need some help here. And so this program was designed to give really the highest rebates for the lowest income families, but help middle income folks as well. Next slide. Okay, so fleets are another area where we felt like public municipal fleets could really do a better job showing an example and advertising that they're going electric. And a couple of cities have EV first purchasing policies, which is great. It just means that wherever they can, when they make fleet replacements, that they'll choose electric or zero emission vehicles. Palo Alto has a nice policy, and we've been encouraging other cities and counties in the area to use that as a model. Another program that I want to highlight was started by the city of Los Angeles, and they went in and did a group buy together with 29 other cities. And then as part of the climate summit just last year, they opened up a government portal to do group buys for any of the climate mayor cities. But as it turns out, it's not limited to climate mayor cities. Anyone can participate. It's just for municipal government. And since then, our county, San Mateo County, has started a program to provide technical assistance to all the cities to help them use the open government portal for EVs. And so we hope that we'll see some changeovers in the fleets. And the county program will help the cities develop the infrastructure they need so that when they purchase the EVs, that they have a way to keep them charged. Next slide. All right, so I've spoken a couple times about our community choice energy agencies having really interesting programs, and want to note that it's in the best interests of these CCEs to really advance EVs and work on electrifying everything and supporting that in the community. Locally with Peninsula Clean Energy, they've been pretty outspoken about wanting to help cities meet their climate goals. But there are also some other CCEs that have really interesting programs that help accelerate EVs and also use EVs as a way to stabilize the grid and really time the charging of those vehicles. And one of them is Sonoma Clean Power. Sonoma Clean Power has offered free EV charging to all of their customers. They use the eMotorWorks Juice Box, and that Juice Box has special software that controls the timing. And so when the customers agree to get the free EV chargers, they also agree to participate in a program that allows the timing of their charging to be controlled and for the data to be collected and monitored. Another really neat CCE program is around electric buses. Lancaster Choice Energy has worked with their transit district in Antelope Valley to work towards a goal to convert 100% of their transit buses to all electric. And I think they actually convinced BYD, one of the electric vehicle manufacturers from China, to site a manufacturing facility locally to produce some of the buses for them. They have a goal of putting 85 new electric buses on the street over the next 10 years. And I think they already have 2, and they've proven that on a cost per mile basis, they've already had an annual savings of around $800,000, just because the operating cost for those electric buses is much lower. And so that's been a great success out of Lancaster. They're also installing wireless charging stations. They're embedded in the pavement. And so they're sort of advancing the technology. And the range on those buses is around 160 miles on one battery charge, which is great. I'll note that local bus manufacturer Proterra, which is based in Burlingame, now has buses that are pushing around 300 miles or more on a single charge. So that's really advanced a lot in the last few years. All right, next slide. On vehicle to home and vehicle to grid charging, there have been a lot of advances. One small benefit that came out of the terrible tsunami that hit Japan several years ago is that Nissan and some of the local auto manufacturers focused on using, or the potential to use, the batteries from EVs to power homes during a disaster. And so Nissan is one of the companies that has one of the most advanced technologies to use your car battery to power your home and ultimately to feed energy back onto the grid. And here are some examples on the slide. I'm not super knowledgeable on this issue, but our soon-to-be released commercial all-electric construction guide will come out and have a section dedicated to this. And of course, John Armstrong with Redwood Energy is very knowledgeable on this, so you can direct your questions to him.
Modestly knowledgeable, but thank you. I'll just give you a minute warning, just so you know.
So, okay, so wrapping up, next slide. This is just to show that electric vehicles now come in all shapes and sizes, and I'm not going to give a rundown of all the EVs that are out there on the market. I will say that every year it's delightful to see new models come on the market, and now there are some minivans and SUVs and pickup trucks, and the medium duty market is developing, and we have some local manufacturers in the Bay Area, which is exciting, and the transit buses as well. Next slide. One of the best developments that we've seen is in the space of pickup trucks. And there's one local company called EVAOS in Silicon Valley. I think they're based in Santa Clara. They take regular trucks and modify them into a couple of different configurations. They could modify a regular truck to run electric hybrid, or they can soup up the truck with extra batteries so that it becomes a mobile power provider. So for events, for example, they can add extra battery packs in the truck bed, and it could be very useful not just for special events but for construction sites. And so this is something that we've been encouraging our city, Menlo Park, to look into for their Parks and Rec fleet and for other utility uses. And then also in this space, Tesla recently announced that they're designing a pickup truck, and we'll be releasing that soon. And they already unveiled a large semi truck, but I think someone else is talking about electric freight later on, so I'll leave it to them. And then just want to note that there are at least 4 to up to 9 electric SUVs about to hit the market by name brands like Audi, BMW, Volvo, Mercedes, Hyundai, and several others. And then, of course, the Ford F-150. I think that's one of the most popular pickups in the US. There is an electric version of that truck expected out soon, so that's exciting. Next slide. Okay, so I've been talking a lot about how do we convince consumers and change minds and reach out to folks and transcend cultural barriers. And some countries are taking a different approach. They are banning the sale of fossil fuel vehicles at a future date, and those dates range from 2025 to 2040. There are at least 12 countries that have some version of a ban or sunset of fossil fuel vehicles on the books now. And that includes India and China, but as you all know, the US is not part of that list. California did run a bill last year. It didn't get very far. It was squashed pretty quickly by the fossil fuel industry. And we hope that that bill will resurface again this year, but we can't really wait for that silver bullet of a ban on fossil fuels. I think we need to still focus on how do we really change the market and accelerate the market. Next slide. Okay, this is in the vein of wild ideas, but there's actually an effort in Toronto to label gas stations to improve consumer awareness of the gasoline vehicles that they drive. And this is really similar to the Surgeon General warning that's on every pack of cigarettes. It's just telling consumers about the dangers of gasoline and fossil fuels. And there were efforts underway in San Francisco and Berkeley to install these labels on the pumps. I think there was a legal threat, and those efforts are on hold for now, but they could come back at any time. Next slide. So this is what it could look like, and I just wanted to invite everyone to imagine a day when the local fueling stations are all EV chargers, and there are a few remaining pumps with gasoline, kind of like the days of leaded gas back in the 70s when it was transitioning, where the few remaining gas pumps actually have labels showing the danger. Next slide. Okay, I just wanted to thank everyone, and hopefully it brought you guys back to being on time. This is my contact information. Happy to share any of the reports that I mentioned or any of the information. We have a lot of that available on our website, of course, but if you have trouble finding it, you can shoot me an email or a text. Thank you so much.
Yay! Well done, Diane. Slide decks, just so you know, we're going to post all of these as video on our YouTube website. This is being recorded right now. And I'm not exactly sure if can we keep track of all the email addresses of people that have signed in? Because we could try to send it to everybody.
I don't know, but
well,
you could put my email and everyone can reach out to me if they'd like.
Okay, we'll put Amanda's email address on the side so you can contact her because she has all the slide decks. Okay, Diane, thank you. We're going to